The nine tails roared over Konoha, while Minato Namikaze knelt beside two newborn children and understood that he had only seconds to choose which one could survive him. The girl had been born first. Kaede was alive, but barely. Her tiny fingers moved against Kushina's blanket, and every pulse of chakra through her body came unevenly, like a flame struggling in bad wind. The medic beside them had already warned that her chakra network had not stabilized after the strain of the birth. If she survived the night, it was expected to settle as her body recovered. At that moment, even a normal sealing technique could stop her heart. Naruto had arrived minutes later, screaming hard enough to make the exhausted medic laugh. He was smaller than Minato had imagined his son would be, but his pulse was strong, his chakra dense, and the Uzumaki vitality in him was unmistakable. Outside, another crash shook the room. Dust fell from the ceiling. Kushina understood before Minato explained anything. The nine tails could not be left free, and after Minato divided its chakra, the half that could be entrusted to a child still needed a vessel immediately. Trying to place that burden in Kaede would kill her before the seal could stabilize. Naruto's stronger body at least had a chance. Every instinct in Minato rejected the idea of weighing one child against the other. Love had nothing to do with the decision. Only Naruto's body could survive what had to be done. Kushina pulled both babies close once. Then she pressed her lips to Naruto's forehead and held him steady while Minato formed the final seals. By sunrise, the Nine Tails was gone from the streets. So were Naruto and Kaede's parents. Hiruzen Sarutobi buried the truth beneath orders, sealed records, and threats of punishment. The ordinary people of Konoha were told only what they already needed to know. The orphaned twins were to be protected. Naruto contained the Nine Tails. No adult was permitted to spread that fact among the village children. It was enough to prevent a mob. It was not enough to make people forget the dead. A retired kunoichi named Sachiko was assigned to raise the twins in a small house a few streets from the academy. She had a stiff knee, a voice that could stop an argument through two closed doors, and absolutely no patience for villagers who confused fear with permission to mistreat children. Nobody struck Naruto while she was around. Nobody dragged him out of a store by the collar. Most adults were more careful than that anyway. They simply became different when he entered the room. Kaede learned the difference before she learned why. On their 6th birthday, an old neighbor brought her a small honey cake with dried fruit pressed into the top. Naruto was not written anywhere on the paper wrapping. Naruto announced that he hated sweets. He said it loudly enough for the neighbor to hear as she hurried away. Then he sat at the table across from Kaede and watched every movement of her fork. Kaede took one bite. Naruto's eyes followed it. She took a second bite. His eyes narrowed, as if she were performing a forbidden technique. Without a word, she cut the cake in half and pushed one piece across the table. Naruto folded his arms and told her he did not want charity. Kaede shrugged and started pulling the plate back. 3 seconds later, Naruto had both hands around it. By the time Sachiko returned from the kitchen, the half was gone, and Naruto was asking whether Kaede planned to finish the frosting around the edge of hers. Those moments were easy. Other moments became harder as they grew older. A grocer named Hara always greeted Kaede with a smile because she counted her coins carefully and never knocked over the vegetable baskets. When Naruto entered behind her, Hara's smile tightened. He still sold the boy what he asked for. He simply watched Naruto's hands until the door closed again. Children invited Kaede to games in the lane. Sometimes a parent appeared at the doorway and quietly told the child that Kaede could come, but her brother should stay home. At first, Kaede always refused. Later, she refused most of the time. Then, one summer afternoon, after 3 children begged her to join them by the river, she looked back at Naruto, sitting on the front step with a broken practice kunai in his lap. She promised she would only be gone for an hour. Naruto grinned and told her to go. He even made fun of her for looking guilty. He kept grinning until she turned the corner. Then he spent the next hour throwing the broken kunai at the same fence post until the wood around it looked like something had tried to eat it. Kaede came home before sunset with wet sandals and a paper toy someone had folded for her. She offered the toy to Naruto. He told her it looked stupid. He kept it in his drawer for 6 years. By their final year at the academy, the difference between the twins had become public knowledge, even among people who knew nothing about the Nine Tails. Kaede Uzumaki was one of the best students in her class. She did not have the frightening natural talent of a once-in-a-generation prodigy. She simply did almost everything well. Her chakra control was precise. Her handwriting was neat. She remembered hand seals after seeing them twice. She arrived early. She cleaned her weapons. She listened when instructors spoke. Naruto seemed designed to irritate every system that rewarded those traits. His chakra reserves were enormous, and his stamina embarrassed older students. He could run until other children were bent over with their hands on their knees, then complain that the exercise had been boring. In practical situations, he noticed odd details quickly and came up with solutions nobody had taught him. His control was terrible. Trying to make a basic academy clone with Naruto's chakra was like asking someone to fill a teacup from a waterfall. He also hated doing anything the slow way if an entertaining shortcut was available. Katie had kept him from becoming completely hopeless. She forced him to finish assignments before dinner. She taught him how to make rice without burning the bottom of the pot. She made him practice the boring parts of transformation until he could hold a face for more than 10 seconds. Naruto repaid her by turning every ordinary task into a competition. He kept a chart on the wall of their room labeled Official Twin Victory Record. Kaede discovered it one evening and stared at the numbers for a full minute. According to Naruto, he had 94 victories, and she had 81. She demanded to know how that was possible when she beat him in almost every academy exercise. Naruto showed her the categories. First one home from the academy. 1 point. Most bowls of ramen eaten in one sitting. 3 points because it required endurance. Longest time standing on one leg. 1 point. Fastest capture of the kitchen cockroach. 10 points because Kaede had screamed and therefore forfeited with dishonor. Kaede tore the paper down. Naruto made another one before breakfast. The joke stopped being funny on the training field 2 days later. Their instructor paired them for a sparring assessment. The other students gathered around the marked circle, already whispering predictions. Kaede took a balanced stance and waited. Naruto did not. He lunged immediately, threw one shuriken high, another low, and used the first as a distraction to close the distance. Kaede slipped outside his right arm and struck his shoulder. Naruto stumbled, deliberately let his knee buckle, and made his fall look worse than it was. Kaede knew him too well. She did not rush in. Naruto kicked a practice kunai out of the grass, where he had hidden it before class. The weapon spun toward her ankle. Kaede jumped, and Naruto came up from the ground with a grin, reaching for the tag on her belt that counted as a match victory. Kaede caught his wrist in the air. Naruto twisted. She turned with him, used his momentum, and sent him flat onto his back. He bounced once in the dust. The class laughed. Naruto rolled away before she could pin him, and nearly caught her with a replacement trick using a wooden training post. He stayed in the fight far longer than most expected. Twice, he forced Kaede to abandon textbook counters because he did something that no reasonable student was supposed to do. In the end, she trapped his sleeve under her knee and held a blunt kunai at his throat. The instructor called the match. Around them, the students immediately praised Kaede's footwork and control. One boy asked whether she might graduate near the top of the class. Another said Naruto had been lucky to last that long. Naruto sat up and rubbed dust from his cheek. Nobody mentioned that the match had lasted almost 4 times longer than his previous one against her. Kaede noticed. She almost said something. Then, the instructor called the next pair, and the moment passed. That afternoon, a senior academy instructor named Fumio Takase stopped Kaede outside the classroom. He supervised an extra training group for the strongest graduating students and had been watching her scores for months. He offered her a place. Kaede tried not to smile too quickly. The program meant access to advanced drills, better instructors, and recommendations after graduation. She had wanted something like it for years. Naruto, standing beside her, immediately asked whether he could try too. Takase looked at him for a moment before answering. The program, he explained, was for students with a serious chance of becoming exceptional shinobi. Naruto needed to focus on passing the standard requirements. Then, Takase turned back to Kaede and added that she would progress faster if she stopped dragging her brother into every opportunity she earned. Kaede's face tightened. Naruto's grin disappeared so quickly that she almost reached for his sleeve. Takase was already walking toward the private training yard. He told her the session was starting now. Kaede looked at Naruto. She could refuse. She knew that. Naruto knew it too. He shoved both hands into his pockets and told her she would be stupid to waste the chance. Kaede followed Takase. She spent 2 hours learning a wire trap she had wanted to practice for months. When she came home, Naruto's new victory chart was on the wall. He had added a category called Most Annoying Twin. He had given Kaede 50 points. She laughed despite herself. Naruto laughed too. Neither of them mentioned the training yard. The academy field examination took place 3 weeks later in an old training area east of the village wall. The ground had once been used by genin teams learning navigation. But the wooden towers were half rotten now, and the paths had been allowed to grow narrow beneath cedar roots and thorny brush. The assignment was simple on paper. Small student groups would locate stamped markers hidden through the zone, avoid instructor traps, and return before dusk. No one expected real danger. The academy had checked the perimeter that morning. Kaede's group included Naruto, 2 quieter students named Emi and Kota, and a boy who had already decided Kaede should lead because her map score was the best. Naruto objected before they had even left the starting date. His objection was not to Kaede leading. It was to Kaede leading in what he called the most boring possible way. She followed the marked route, checked every branch trail, and paused at each suspicious patch of ground. Naruto kept arguing that an instructor would hide the best marker somewhere students were told not to look. Kaede reminded him that leaving the assigned sector cost points. Naruto said points were invented by people who enjoyed being wrong on paper. They found their first 2 markers because of Kaede. They found the third because Naruto noticed that one tree had fresh mud on its trunk, almost 2 meters above the ground. An instructor had climbed it that morning and wiped his sandals badly. Naruto scaled the tree, reached inside a hollow branch, and dropped the marker into Kaede's hands with a look so smug that she considered throwing it back up. By early afternoon, the group was doing well. Then Naruto stopped talking. Kaede noticed because silence from him was more alarming than any warning bell. He crouched beside a narrow trail and touched 2 fingers to the dirt. A heel print crossed the path. It was deeper than a child's, too wide for any academy sandal, and the edge was fresh. Kaede assumed it belonged to an instructor. Naruto pointed at a second mark near a bush. Someone had dragged a heavy crate through the brush, then tried to sweep the track away with a branch. Instructors did not carry crates during navigation tests. Kaede's expression changed. She signaled the others back and began leading them toward the nearest observation post. They never reached it. A man stepped from behind a cedar 30 meters ahead, one hand already inside his jacket. He looked like a merchant at first. Mud-colored traveling clothes, cloth cap, no forehead protector. Then his eyes moved across the children and settled on the map case at Kaede's hip. He told them they had taken the wrong path and should go back. Kaede did not answer. She saw the wire loop under his sleeve. The man saw her see it. His first kunai came low. Kaede knocked it aside and shouted for the others to retreat. The children reacted almost exactly as they had been trained. Emi moved behind Kota. The boy with the map dropped a smoke pellet. Kate placed herself between the stranger and the group. The stranger moved faster than anyone from the academy. He burst through the smoke and struck Kaede's forearm hard enough to numb her hand. She barely kept hold of her kunai. His second strike would have caught her temple. Naruto hit him from the side with his entire body. It was not elegant. It worked. All three went into the brush. Naruto rolled, came up first, and threw a handful of dirt at the man's face. The stranger cursed and kicked him in the ribs. Naruto flew backward, struck a tree root, and lost his breath. Kaede attacked immediately. She used the wire trap Takase had shown her, looping a line around two trunks and snapping it tight at shin height. The man spotted it before stepping in. He vaulted the wire, caught Kaede's wrist, and twisted until her kunai fell. Everything she had learned was useful. None of it was enough. He knew what trained children were supposed to do. Naruto, coughing behind a stump, understood the problem sooner. The stranger kept glancing past the students toward a fern-covered ridge on his left, as if something hidden there mattered more than the quickest escape route. Naruto threw a transformation seal and changed into Kaede. The result lasted only a few seconds, but it forced the man to look twice. Naruto used the opening to bolt in the opposite direction from the observation post. Kaede shouted his name. The stranger released her at once and chased him. That was when Kaede understood. Naruto had not panicked. He had found something the man cared about more than escaping. Naruto crashed through the ferns on the ridge with the shinobi only a few steps behind him. At the top, he saw 3 pack animals tied below, and 4 men loading narrow wooden cases onto them. Contraband. One of the men looked up in shock. Naruto grinned through a split lip and screamed as loudly as he could that the academy instructors had found them. They had not. The smugglers did not know that. 2 grabbed their packs. 1 started cutting a horse loose. Another ran straight into the path Naruto had just come from. The shinobi cursed and abandoned the chase long enough to stop his own people from scattering. Naruto turned the confusion into something worse. He transformed into the smuggler leader and ran downslope shouting contradictory orders. He kicked one crate into another. He threw a smoke bomb he had stolen from the academy supply pouch. Then, he pointed uphill and yelled that Konoha Jonin were coming from the north. A frightened smuggler threw a knife at the false leader. The real leader knocked it aside. For 10 chaotic seconds, nobody knew whom to obey. That was enough. Kaede arrived with the other students behind her. Not because she wanted them in the fight, but because she had realized Naruto was trying to make enough noise to guide the instructors. She ordered Kota and Emi to stay behind the ridge, then began hurling academy signal flares into the air. The first flare hissed red above the trees. The second burst yellow. The smugglers understood what they meant. Their shinobi stopped trying to recover the cargo and rushed Naruto with killing intent that froze every student on the ridge. Naruto saw the man's shoulders turn and knew he could not outrun him. He grabbed the nearest wooden case and shoved it downhill. The shinobi had to choose: catch the child or stop the case from smashing into the rocks and spilling whatever his employers had paid him to move. His eyes flicked toward the crate. Naruto saw the answer. He kicked the case harder. The man moved for it. Kaede's wire snapped around his ankle. This time, he had not seen her set it. He cut the line almost instantly, but a Konoha instructor landed between him and Naruto before he could move again. 2 more instructors appeared on the ridge. The fight ended quickly after that. On the walk back to the academy, Naruto kept one arm pressed against his ribs and told anyone who asked that the kick had barely hurt. He stopped saying that after Sachiko made him laugh at dinner and he almost fell out of his chair. The formal review happened the next morning. Kaede was praised for keeping the student group together, using the signal flares, and maintaining enough discipline that nobody had been killed. The instructors were right to praise her. If the children had scattered through the forest, the smugglers could have taken hostages. Naruto received a different lecture. He had abandoned the planned retreat. He had deliberately drawn a trained shinobi away from the group. He had entered an unknown hostile position without support. He had interfered with criminals carrying cargo, whose contents were not yet identified. Every criticism was reasonable. That was what made it sting. Takase told him that improvisation was not an excuse for recklessness. Another instructor added that luck had protected him from the consequences of his choices. Naruto looked at Kaede. She knew it was not luck. She knew the stranger had been seconds from striking her unconscious. She knew Naruto's decision had exposed the hidden smugglers and bought time for the instructors to arrive. She also knew he had taken an insane risk and could easily have died. The adults were praising her. For once, Takase looked at her exactly the way she had always wanted an elite instructor to look at her. Kaede lowered her eyes to the table. She said nothing. Naruto watched her for half a second longer, then turned back to Takase and accepted the punishment. That evening, Kaede waited in the yard with 2 practice kunai and asked whether he wanted to work on footwork. Naruto was repairing the fence Sachiko had ordered him to fix. He said he was busy. The next evening, she asked again. He said he had already trained. After that, Kaede stopped asking. Naruto stopped needing excuses. One detail from the smuggler incident disappeared beneath the academy reports. The captured shinobi had a minor sensory talent that had been useful for guarding contraband routes. During the fight, he had felt the reserve behind Naruto's clumsy academy techniques, far larger than any students had a right to be. Before an instructor found the tiny communication tag hidden under his tongue, he sent a short warning to one of the smuggler's outside contacts. The message described a blonde academy boy with abnormal chakra reserves. It did not contain Naruto's name. That was enough for the man who received it. He knew the 9 tails had been sealed into a newborn on the night Konoha was attacked. And a child of the right age, with that much chakra, narrowed the search considerably. Naruto knew nothing about any of it. He was too busy trying to graduate. The clone technique nearly ruined him. He could transform. He could repulse himself with a log. He could hit targets well enough when he was not trying to show off. But every time he attempted the basic clone jutsu, he poured too much chakra into the technique and created something pale, unstable, and barely capable of standing. For months, Kaede had been the person who corrected his control exercises. Now, he trained alone. He filled buckets and tried to release water 1 cup at a time. He balanced leaves on his forehead until they stuck to his hair from sweat. He practiced after class, before breakfast, and once on Sachiko's roof, until she dragged him down by the ankle because he had cracked 2 tiles. On graduation day, Naruto stood in front of Iruka Umino, with his hands shaking from exhaustion. He formed the seal. The first clone collapsed. The second leaned sideways. The third held. It looked miserable, but it was recognizable, stable, and technically successful. Iruka stared at it, then at Naruto. Naruto held his breath. Naruto did not shout until he was outside the room. Then the entire hallway heard him. Kaede graduated near the top of the class. Naruto scraped through. They both wore Konoha forehead protectors home that evening. Sachiko pretended there was dust in her eye while serving dinner. The next morning, team assignments broke the pattern everyone expected. Hiruzen had approved the unusual arrangement personally. The academy reports showed that separating the twins would only harden the roles other people had built around them. Kaede was becoming the responsible child who was expected to manage Naruto, while Naruto was becoming the difficult child everyone expected to fail. Hiruzen wanted them forced to work as partners instead. He also wanted a leader who would not look at Naruto and see a sealed weapon before seeing a genin. Kaede and Naruto were placed together. Their third teammate was Daichi Morita, a steady student with average scores. Good basic taijutsu, and the useful ability to look at the Uzumaki twins arguing and refuse to become involved. Their team leader was Anko Mitarashi, selected under the same personal approval from the Hokage. When Anko entered the classroom, she ignored the usual speech about teamwork. She looked at the 3 new forehead protectors, asked which of them had already decided they were talented, and smiled when Kaede raised an eyebrow. Anko's reputation made some adults uncomfortable. She had survived Orochimaru's influence, carried a pursed mark, and knew what it felt like when strangers looked at a person and saw danger before they saw a human being. She kept that history to herself and gave Naruto no special treatment. Kaede received the same indifference toward reputation. Anko read her academy record once, folded the page, and used it to swat a mosquito. Kaede looked personally offended. Naruto decided he liked their new teacher. Anko's team test began on a wide training ground, filled with old walls, shallow ditches, and wooden towers. She gave the genin 3 tasks. Recover a red tag from a tower. Move a weighted training dummy across a rope bridge. Reach the far gate before sunset. Then she told them that anyone who failed would return to the academy. Naruto sprinted for the tower. Kaede sprinted faster. Daichi watched both of them disappear and muttered something about requesting a transfer. The tower tag was tied to a post in plain sight. Naruto reached it first and triggered a pit trap. Kaede reached it second and triggered the net above the pit while trying to pull him out. Daichi arrived third, stared down at both twins hanging in different traps, and asked whether either genius had considered that the obvious tag might be bait. At the rope bridge, Naruto insisted he could carry the dummy alone. He made it halfway before the bridge tilted and dropped both of them into the shallow river. Kaede tried next and used chakra control to steady her footing, but the weight pulled her sideways when Anko began throwing blunt kunai from the bank. They failed again. By mid-afternoon, both twins were wet, dirty, and furious. Naruto tried deception. He transformed into Kaede and approached Anko with perfect hair, perfect posture, and what he believed was a convincing expression of disciplined disappointment. Anko looked at him once. She told him the transformation was excellent. Naruto smiled. Then she added that Kaede had never stood that crooked in her life. The real Kaede, watching from behind a wall, became angrier at the insult to her posture than at Naruto for impersonating her. Daichi finally snapped. He told them that Anko's tasks were impossible alone, because that was the point. The tower needed one person to draw the traps, while another retrieved the tag. The dummy required 2 people to balance the load, while the third blocked Anko's throws. The final gate could only be opened by 3 pressure plates placed too far apart for one person to reach. Naruto accused him of sounding like an instructor. Daichi told him someone on the team had to sound sane. Kaede mapped the tower traps, while Naruto deliberately set off the ones they could use. Daichi retrieved the tag. At the bridge, Kaede controlled the pace. Daichi stabilized the dummy, and Naruto blocked Anko's practice weapons with replacements, thrown boards, and one transformation into the dummy itself that confused everyone for several seconds. They reached the final gate with the sun touching the trees. The 3 pressure plates clicked beneath their feet. Nothing happened. Naruto's eye twitched. Anko stepped out from behind the gate, eating dango, and informed them that they had passed 5 minutes ago. The plates were not connected to anything. Naruto chased her across the field. He did not catch her. The test gave Anko enough information to understand the twins better than their academy scores had. Kaede could make a plan and execute it with precision. Naruto could turn a failing plan into something useful, while everyone else was still deciding what had gone wrong. His worst weakness was not intelligence. It was chakra control. A week later, after speaking with Hiruzen, Anko took Naruto to a sealed practice room beneath a Konoha training hall. Kaede and Daichi were allowed to watch from behind a protective line. Anko explained that ordinary clones demanded fine division and shaping. Naruto possessed enough chakra to overwhelm that process every time. A shadow clone was different. It created a physical duplicate and divided chakra more directly. It was more dangerous and more expensive, but Naruto's reserves made that expense less ridiculous than it would be for most new genin. She showed him the hand seal. Naruto tried once. The room filled with smoke. When it cleared, Anko was surrounded by 14 Narutos. She stared at them. Every Naruto stared back. One asked whether that was good. Another said, obviously it was good, because 14 was more than 1. A third announced that since the clones were real enough to touch things, they could finally finish chores faster. A fourth immediately argued that clones were not servants and the original Naruto should wash the floor himself. Within seconds, all 14 were shouting about which Naruto counted as the original for purposes of labor. Kaede covered her mouth with one hand. Daichi walked to the door and opened it. Anko asked where he was going. He said he wanted to leave before the technique became hereditary. Anko dispelled the clones herself. Naruto dropped to one knee from the sudden return of experience and chakra strain, then looked up with a grin so wide it hurt his face. Kaede's laughter faded. She had spent years being better than Naruto at almost every formal technique they shared. 14 physical copies were far beyond what Kaede's reserves could support. Even 4 would leave her nearly empty, and 2 would already be expensive if she expected to fight afterward. For the first time, she was looking at one of Naruto's abilities and saw something that was not a badly controlled version of a skill she could already perform. This strength belonged to him. The next month taught Naruto that having a useful technique and using it well were very different things. At first, every problem looked like something that could be solved by adding more Narutos. A missing supply box became 8 Narutos searching the same shed and arguing over who had checked which shelf. A patrol exercise became 12 Narutos trampling the tracks they were supposed to follow. During sparring, he once created so many clones that Kaede simply stepped behind a tree and waited for them to collide with one another. Anko refused to let him stay stupid with a good technique. She made him limit himself to 3 clones, then 2, then 1. She forced each clone to have a purpose before it was created. One watched from a rooftop, while the original moved through an alley. One deliberately exposed itself to a trap, so Naruto could learn how the mechanism worked when the clone dispersed. 2 attacked from opposite directions, while Naruto remained hidden and watched how an opponent chose a target. The first time a destroyed clone returned its memory to him, Naruto nearly vomited from the sudden overlap of sensation. A week later, he was using that same effect to scout corners without risking his own neck. Kaede developed in the opposite direction. She needed fewer bodies because she wasted almost no movement. She learned to set wire while running, to throw a kunai so the attached line wrapped around a branch, and to use a basic wind release pulse strong enough to change the path of a projectile by a few inches. Anko also made her practice feeding that same weak pulse through a taut wire. The wind did not make the line stronger. It snapped slack out of it at the exact instant a trap closed, which was often all Kaede needed. Daichi became the hinge between them. He was not as fast as Kaede, or as unpredictable as Naruto, but he could hold a position and recognize when both twins were about to turn a mission into a contest. Anko eventually described their team in one sentence. Kaede built the shape of a fight. Naruto broke that shape at the right moment. Daichi made sure both of them survived long enough to argue about who deserved credit. She also gave Daichi one standing instruction. If either twin tried to turn a bad idea into a solo mission, he was to make sure neither of them went alone. Daichi complained that this sounded less like a tactical role and more like a curse. A few days later, a rotten loft collapsed under Daichi during a routine storehouse inspection. Naruto's nearest clone threw itself beneath the falling shelf and shoved Daichi clear before dispersing under the impact. Daichi landed bruised but unhurt. Naruto immediately tried to count the rescue as 3 victories on the twin chart. Daichi argued that basic teamwork was worth 1 point at most, which was the closest he had come to voluntarily participating in the chart. The description proved accurate during a mission to capture a noblewoman's escaped ferret. Naruto surrounded a storage district with 20 clones. The ferret saw 20 identical orange jackets and fled in terror. Every clone chased it. The animal ran through a vegetable stall, under a wagon, across a bathhouse roof, and directly through a group of academy students. The clones followed in a moving wave. Kaede followed the clones. Daichi followed Kaede because someone had to apologize to civilians. Anko followed last, with the expression of a woman reconsidering every choice that had led her to employment. They caught the ferret inside Hara's grocery store after it climbed onto Naruto's head and refused to move. Hara charged Konoha for 3 broken baskets. Naruto tried to count the mission as 5 victories on his chart. Kaede reduced it to -2. The easy weeks ended with a C-rank escort assignment. A medic named Keiko Sano needed to deliver 6 sealed cases of antibiotics, burn salves, and field dressings to a small border settlement called Kawaoda. The last 3 shipments had been robbed along the same road. Every surviving driver described ordinary bandits. None had seen a forehead protector, ninjutsu, or any confirmed use of chakra. The route was close enough to regular Fire Country patrol routes that a team led by a special jonin was considered more than sufficient. Anko read the mission summary twice. The repeated robberies bothered her, but the thieves had avoided killing drivers, had shown no known shinobi techniques, and had taken the medicine instead of attacking the people transporting it. On the information Konoha possessed, there was no formal basis to raise the assignment above C rank. Kaede wanted the assignment badly. Takase had spoken to her again after graduation. If her early mission record remained strong, he could recommend her for an advanced development program designed for promising young shinobi. The program was not a promotion, but it could lead to specialized training far sooner than most genin received it. There was one problem. It would eventually require reassignment from Team Anko. Kaede had not told Naruto. She told herself there was nothing to tell yet. The convoy left Konoha before sunrise. Keiko rode on the first cart beside the driver. The medicine cases were strapped under waxed canvas. Anko moved ahead and behind the convoy at irregular intervals. Kaede watched the road. Daichi watched the tree line. Naruto used 2 clones to scout far enough ahead that their memories could warn him of changes without exhausting his reserves. They reached the Old South Road by afternoon. Naruto's first clone dispelled after finding a broken milestone. The memory returned with a sharp burst of detail. Fresh scratches on the stone. A thin strip of paper, hidden in moss. Chakra ink. Naruto raised his fist. The convoy stopped. Anko was beside him almost immediately. He described the tag. Her expression hardened. The mission report had described ordinary bandits, and ordinary bandits did not hide chakra-responsive tuning seals along roads. The classification was already wrong. Anko ordered everyone off the carts and into the trees. The first suppression pulse struck before Keiko reached cover. Naruto felt it as a pressure behind his ribs. His chakra did not vanish. It lurched. For a fraction of a second, every pathway in his body seemed to close, then open again, out of rhythm. Kaede felt only a brief prickling across her skin, and Daichi barely reacted at all. Whatever the portable device was doing, it had been tuned for Naruto. His active clone collapsed. 4 masked attackers dropped from the ridge. Anko met 2 of them before they touched the ground. Her kunai struck the first attacker's blade, slid down it, and opened his sleeve at the wrist. She pivoted under the second, drove an elbow into his ribs, and forced both men away from the civilians. Kaede pulled Keiko behind the wagon, while Daichi blocked a thrown senbon with his forearm guard. Naruto tried to make 3 clones. The suppression pulse hit again. Only one appeared. It came out solid, but Naruto's vision blurred from the effort. The attackers were not trying to steal the medicine. One ran past the covered medicine cases without even looking at them, and headed straight for Naruto. That answered the most important question. Naruto sent his single clone toward Keiko, while he moved the other way. The attacker followed the original. Kaede saw it and changed her plan instantly. She looped wire around a wagon wheel, threw the free end past Daichi, and used his body as a moving anchor. The line snapped across the attacker's path. He jumped it, exactly as she expected. Naruto hit him in midair. The punch did not drop the man, but it broke his balance. Daichi stepped in and drove a shoulder into his side. Kaede's second wire caught his wrist before he could form a hand seal. For a moment, the 3 genin had him. Then he released a burst of lightning chakra through the wire. Kaede's fingers locked. Daichi was thrown backward. Naruto took a heel to the chest and rolled under the cart. The attacker reached for him. Anko, snake, struck first. It coiled around the man's forearm, and Anko yanked him sideways hard enough to smash him into the wagon axle. She had already wounded one of the other attackers, but a dark line of blood ran down her left side where a blade had slipped beneath her vest. The 4th attacker appeared on the ridge, holding a square metal plate covered in seals. Hairline cracks had already begun to spread across its corners from repeated activation. He triggered it again. The pressure inside Naruto's body became a hammer, and drove him to one knee. The man who had attacked him stepped close enough for Naruto to see his eyes through the mask. He called Naruto the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. The word stopped Kaide more completely than the lightning had. Naruto looked at her. She knew the Nine-Tails had attacked Konoha on the night they were born. Every child did. She knew adults treated Naruto differently. She had heard pieces of rumors over the years, and watched Sachiko shut down conversations before they reached the twins. But nobody had ever said the truth plainly enough to escape interpretation. The Nine-Tails was inside her brother. The portable plate gave a sharp, metallic crack on its next activation, and Anko used the failure immediately. She wounded a second attacker and nearly trapped the man carrying the device before smoke tags burst across the road. The mercenaries retreated under cover rather than risk a close fight with her. They had confirmed that the tuning worked, but the cracked field plate could only interrupt Naruto's chakra in short pulses. It could not hold him long enough to transport him while Anko was still fighting. Anko wanted to turn back before the enemy could regroup. Her rear scout snake returned first. Anko had sent it toward Konoha when the convoy stopped, and it came back with stone dust on its scales and one of her marker tags scorched black. The signal she used for a route that could not be crossed safely. The road behind them had been closed by an artificial rockslide. Barrier tags covered the easiest detour, and forcing the carts through the slope would place Keiko in a never-prepared kill zone. Kawara's old border post was less than 2 hours ahead, with thick stone walls, storage rooms, a signal tower, and an underground shelter from an earlier period when the frontier had been less stable. Anko chose the defensible position. They reached the post before dark with both carts and all 6 medicine cases. Kawawura's residents had already gathered there because local scouts had seen armed men moving in the hills. There were 23 civilians inside, including children, 2 elderly farmers, the settlement headman, and a wounded patrolman. The signal tower looked usable from the courtyard. It was not. Someone had cut the internal pulley and scraped the chakra ink from its emergency signal plate days earlier. Anko sent her fastest messenger snake west with a written warning for the nearest Fire Country patrol before the enemy could close the area completely. The wounded patrolman estimated that even a successful message would not bring help before the hours just before dawn. Keiko opened one of the medicine cases to stitch Anko's side and treat the patrolman's infected leg. The other 5 were carried into the stone storehouse, while Kaide and Daichi reinforced doors. Naruto sat on a storage crate and stared at his hands. Kaede approached twice, and both times she stopped before speaking. The answer came from outside the wall instead. A man's voice crossed the courtyard, with the calm confidence of someone who believed the ground around the post already belonged to him. He introduced himself as Masato Kurose, once a shinobi of Konoha's barrier corps. Anko went still at the name. The file returned to her in pieces she did not need to say aloud. A competent barrier specialist, whose family had died during the Nine-Tails attack, followed years later by disciplinary hearings over illegal containment research and then desertion. Masato did not pretend the medicine mattered. The previous robberies had been rehearsals. He needed the road to look dangerous enough that Konoha would keep sending escorts, but harmless enough that it would not send an elite hunting unit. The smuggler's warning from the academy had never given Masato Naruto's name. It had given him an age, a description, and a chakra reserve too large for an ordinary student. Masato already knew the Nine-Tails vessel had been a newborn on the night of the attack. He spent the following weeks watching academy exits through hired eyes until he identified Naruto Uzumaki, then watched outgoing mission teams until the twins left Konoha with the medical convoy. The first ambush had never been meant to complete the capture. The portable plate could test whether Masato's old seal calculations still matched Naruto's Jinchuriki seal. But a device small enough to carry on the road could not suppress him continuously. The old border post was the real trap. Masato had spent weeks restoring the buried barrier chamber beneath it. His people had spread visible movement through the hills, so Kawawara's scouts would move civilians behind the strongest nearby walls. then blocked the road behind the convoy to push Team Anko toward the same place. The civilians were not an accident. They were leverage. If another team had taken the mission, Masato would have let it pass and waited for another shipment. Naruto was the cargo he wanted. Anko demanded the name of the buyer. Masato refused, but he did explain one thing about the arrangement. The buyer had demonstrated that Naruto would be kept under permanent containment rather than allowed to live freely as a Jinchuriki. That was enough for Masato. He no longer cared which village or organization held the chain, only that someone did. The payment would fund the containment research he had continued after leaving Konoha. Kaede looked at Naruto. The idea of being kept under permanent containment made him look younger for an instant. Masato continued, because he knew information could hurt more efficiently than another attack. He had served in the Barrier Corps on the night of the Nine Tails attack. He had helped reinforce emergency seals after the beast disappeared and had seen restricted reports about the newborn vessel. Naruto had been an infant. The Nine Tails had been sealed into him after the attack. Anko ordered Masato to stop talking, but he continued. There had been 2 Uzumaki children that night. The first child's chakra network was temporarily unstable after the birth and could not survive a major seal at that moment. The second possessed the stronger body and enough vitality to give the sealing a chance. When Masato finally moved away from the wall, Naruto looked to Anko instead of his sister. He had no reason to accept an enemy's story simply because it hurt. Anko's jaw tightened. She told them that Masato had twisted the facts into a weapon, but the core of what he had said was true. Hiruzen had briefed her before she accepted the team. Naruto had been the vessel because he was the only infant who could survive it. Anko had already argued that he should be told soon, and now the decision had been taken out of Konoha's hands. Naruto slowly turned toward his sister. Kaede's face had lost all color. For years, she had wondered what was wrong with him, why adults stiffened around him, why strangers offered her sweets and watched him as if he might steal the plate, and why he came home furious from places where she had been praised. Now every memory rearranged itself around a fact she had never been allowed to see. The thing people hated him for had been put inside him to save them, and he had received the seal because she could not have survived it on the night they were born. Kaede sat beside Naruto. Her hands shook once before she folded them together. She tried to tell him she was sorry. Naruto asked which part. That made it worse. Kaede looked at him. Naruto reminded her of Takase's extra training. Then the academy review after the smugglers. He did not accuse her of causing the villagers' fear. He did not blame her for being born weaker that night. He said the part he remembered was watching her know something was unfair and deciding that being praised felt better than saying it. Kaede flinched. She tried to explain that she had not understood. Naruto stood. He said, that was the problem. She understood enough to look away. Kaede reached for his sleeve. Naruto stepped out of reach. He did not want her apology while she was looking at him as if she had just discovered a wound she needed to bandage. Naruto had spent years being handled as someone else's problem, first through fear and now through pity. And he could feel the same choice trying to close around him again. He walked to the opposite side of the courtyard and helped Daichi move barricades until his arms hurt. While carrying a crate through the supply room, he noticed an old drainage channel beneath the outer wall. The opening was narrow enough that an adult could not use it, but a child could crawl through if the rusted grate came loose. Naruto said nothing about it. Kaede remained by the storage crate for several seconds before she forced herself back to work. Outside the walls, Masato's men finished closing the roads. The stationary array beneath the post had 2 layers. The inner circuit was tuned to Naruto and struck his seal far harder than anyone else. The outer barrier spread through the old foundations and slowly interfered with chakra molding across the entire post. By late evening, Kaede's control exercises were slipping at the edges, and even Anko needed a second attempt for a simple summoning seal. Every snake she sent through the maintenance tunnel returned burned by barrier tags. The first messenger had escaped before the outer field fully closed, but help was still hours away. Masato made his offer shortly after midnight. If Naruto walked out alone, the civilians could leave by the western road. If Anko refused, he would keep feeding chakra into the outer array until the defenders could no longer mold techniques reliably, then send men through the lower tunnels. Anko did not trust the promise. She also knew the field was getting stronger, faster than any patrol could reach them. The headman said nothing. Neither did the farmers or the wounded patrolmen. When Naruto looked across the shelter, several faces turned toward him, and then away. A mother pulled her little boy closer. She might have done it because armed men were outside. But Naruto had seen that same glance too many times to misunderstand what fear could become when people were offered a single target for it. Kaede met his eyes from across the courtyard and hesitated. Those few seconds were enough. Before she could decide what to say, Masato triggered a harder surge through the outer array, and his men struck the eastern maintenance tunnel at the same time. Old mortar split from the wall. Anko sent 2 snakes into the breach and shouted for everyone to move the children back. Naruto left one clone hauling a barricade and ran for the supply room. Anko recognized the clone almost immediately. She reached the doorway in time to see Naruto kick the rusted drainage grate loose and crawl into the channel. She could have followed only by leaving the eastern breach, while civilians were still being pulled away from falling stone. She shouted for Naruto to stop. He kept moving. When he emerged outside the wall, Masato's men stopped attacking the post and opened a path toward the western gate. Naruto walked into the open with his hands raised because surrendering himself was the first part of the situation that nobody else had chosen for him. Masato kept his word long enough to begin moving the civilians. His men pulled back from the western road. Anko ordered Kaede and Daichi to remain inside the post, while she escorted the civilians through the first exposed stretch and fought any group that tried to close the route again. Kaede stood beside the gate and watched Masato's men take Naruto toward the ravine. Every rule she had been rewarded for told her to protect the civilians, obey the commander leading the mission, and avoid turning one hostage into 3. Takase would have approved. So would every instructor who had ever praised her discipline. Kaede tightened the straps on her weapon pouch and climbed over the eastern wall. Daichi caught her sleeve before she dropped. He told her that Anko had ordered both of them to stay. Kaede answered that she knew. Then Daichi looked toward the ravine and reminded her of Anko's other standing order. If one of the twins tried to turn a bad idea into a solo mission, he was supposed to stop the other from doing the same. If Kaede went alone now, Masato could gain a second hostage in addition to Naruto. Daichi was not pretending that made the disobedience legal. He was choosing the option that gave Kaede the best chance of coming back. He asked whether she had a plan. Kaede admitted that she had half of one. Daichi sighed, climbed over after her, and said that was still more than Naruto usually had. They followed the old barrier marks down the ravine. Masato's men had covered their footprints, but the active anchors of the suppression field gave themselves away through the faint pressure each emitted when Kaede passed close to the seal marks. The anchors formed a line toward a stone door buried beneath roots. Inside, a narrow passage descended under the post. Daichi stopped 2 guards at the first junction. He could not defeat both quickly, but the corridor was narrow enough to keep them from surrounding him. He jammed one side door with a kunai, forced the first guard through the opening, then kicked the door shut on the man's weapon arm. The second guard had to fight past his own teammate to reach him. Daichi shouted for Kaede to keep moving and used the cramped stonework to turn 2 opponents into one problem at a time. Below them, Naruto was learning the shape of his prison. Masato had taken him into an old barrier chamber built around 8 stone pillars. 4 metal plates were fixed between the pillars, each covered in seal script. Thin lines of ink and copper ran across the floor toward a larger plate behind Masato. A narrow copper filament continued from that central plate to a seal bracer around Masato's left wrist. Whenever he adjusted the circuit, the script on the bracer lit with the same pulse as the plate. Every few seconds, the 4 outer plates activated together. Naruto's chakra seized each time and loosened during the brief interval that followed. Masato strapped a transport seal around Naruto's chest, but did not knock him unconscious yet. The transport seal had to synchronize with the existing seal on Naruto's stomach, while chakra was still circulating naturally. Forcing the process, or sedating him too early, risked damaging the vessel, and the buyer had been explicit that Naruto had to arrive alive and intact. Masato needed several clean cycles before he could lock Naruto's wrists and put him under. Naruto watched the plates instead. He counted the rhythm until the next release, then formed one shadow clone. The clone sprinted left. Masato flicked 2 fingers. The seal on his wrist flashed, and a barrier from the nearest pillar struck the clone apart. The memory returned to Naruto. Masato did not rush to stop the experiment. The transport seal was still calibrating, and each failed clone showed him whether the suppression sectors were catching Naruto's chakra at the expected strength. He assumed a trapped genin was wasting his own energy. Naruto used the same attempts to map the room. On the next release, he sent a clone right and learned that a different pillar answered first. On the 3rd attempt, the clone jumped onto a pillar instead of running for the exit. Masato destroyed it a heartbeat later, but the clone's palm had already touched the copper line. The returning memory carried more than the shape of the pillar. Chakra moved through the copper toward the central plate and then into the control seal around Masato's wrist. The suppression system was a circuit, and Masato was physically linked to its operator node while he controlled it. Damage to an outside junction would change the timing. Damage to the central node, while he remained connected, would send the fault back through his own control seal. Kaede reached the chamber as Masato started tightening the first wrist binding. Her opening kunai did not aim for him. It struck beneath the copper junction on the nearest pillar and wedged its point between the metal strip and old stone. The attached wire ran around the pillar and gave her leverage. Kaede dropped her weight backward and sent the same small wind pulse she had practiced through the taut line, using it only to snap out the last bit of slack. Metal scraped against stone. The weakened junction tore free under the mechanical pull. The suppression field stuttered. Naruto's chakra surged back so quickly that the half-synchronized transport seal cracked. Smoke filled the chamber. 21 Narutos appeared. Masato moved before the smoke cleared. A barrier blade formed along his forearm. He swept it through the first 3 clones and cut them apart. He stepped between 2 more, struck one in the throat, and slapped a seal tag onto the other's chest. The tag exploded with a pulse that erased 5 clones around it. Naruto received 6 sets of memories at once and nearly lost his footing. Masato was stronger than any opponent Naruto had fought. More importantly, he understood how clone users tried to surround a target. He kept one pillar behind him, so Naruto could not complete a circle, and used the seal lines on the floor to feel footsteps. Each time too many clones crowded one side, he triggered a localized suppression burst and erased them together. Every manual burst made the script on his wrist flare, confirming what Naruto's 3rd clone had learned about the return path to the central plate. Kaede attacked from range. 3 kunai struck high, low, and wide. Masato avoided all 3. That was fine. Kaede had not aimed at him. The wires attached to the weapons wrapped around 2 pillars and 1 broken metal bracket. She began changing the chamber instead of trying to hit the man inside it. Naruto understood. His next clones attacked badly on purpose. 2 rushed from the same angle. 1 tripped over another. A 4th jumped too early and was smashed into a wall. Masato saw familiar recklessness and pressed forward, destroying them in groups. Each group pulled him a little farther from the central plate. Kaede shifted another wire. Naruto sent 6 clones from the front. Masato cut through 3. The 4th grabbed his sleeve and vanished under a strike. The 5th ducked too late and took an elbow. The 6th threw itself backward instead of attacking. Masato followed the motion with his eyes. The floor wire tightened around his rear ankle. He cut it before Kaede could pull. She had expected that too. The cut line released tension on a 2nd wire overhead. A loose stone block dropped from the old ceiling. Masato stepped exactly where Naruto wanted him to step. Naruto came out of a transformation beside the fallen block. He had hidden as a broken section of the metal plate, while his clones filled the room. he drove his shoulder into Masato's ribs. The adult shinobi moved with the hit instead of resisting. He caught Naruto by the collar, turned, and slammed him onto the stone floor. Pain flashed through Naruto's spine. Masato planted a suppression tag directly over the seal on Naruto's stomach. The chamber shook with red chakra. The tag had been built to force the Nine-Tails chakra down. The damaged suppression circuit did the opposite when the tag forced more pressure into it. Pressure met pressure. Something hot tore through Naruto's body and flooded outward. Red chakra rolled over his shoulders like steam with weight. His nails sharpened. His teeth hurt. Every sound in the chamber became too clear. Masato backed away for the first time. He looked almost satisfied. This, he said, was the truth Konoha refused to admit. The boy could pretend to be a student, a teammate, a brother. Under enough pressure, the weapon always appeared. Naruto barely heard the words over Kaede's breathing. She stood 3 meters away with a kunai in one hand and wire wrapped around the other. Her face had gone pale, and fear had locked her shoulders, but she stayed beside the grooves that the red chakra was burning into the floor. She had no seal that could fix this, and made no promise that she could save him. Her hand trembled once around the kunai before she steadied it, and told Naruto to look at her. Naruto did. The red chakra still wanted out. Naruto could feel anger pouring into it, feeding it. Hara's cold eyes. The empty half of a birthday cake. Takase's voice. Katie walking into the extra training yard. Katie lowering her eyes during the academy review. 23 civilians looking toward him inside the shelter. Masato wanted those memories to make the decision for him. Naruto dug his fingers into the stone until his nails hurt and forced himself to breathe. The red chakra stopped growing. Then it began to shrink. Masato's satisfaction vanished. Kaede moved the instant Naruto's eyes cleared. Her last 2 wires crossed the chamber. Naruto created 8 clones, not 20. This time, every clone had a purpose. 2 forced Masato away from the rear pillar. 2 attacked low, so he raised the barrier blade. 1 sacrificed itself to the suppression burst. And the returning memory told Naruto exactly when the pulse ended. 3 more clones grabbed the loose wires and changed their angle as they ran. Kaede used those lines to close off the easiest exits from the center of the room, leaving Masato more room to retreat toward the operator plate than anywhere else. Kaede pulled. The lines wrapped Masato's wrist and knee at the same moment. He broke the wrist line almost instantly, but that heartbeat was enough. Naruto and 2 clones hit him together. The clones caught Naruto under the arms and threw him forward with their combined momentum. Naruto drove both feet into Masato's chest at the angle he had been building toward since the 3rd scouting clone touched the circuit. Masato slammed into the central suppression plate. The physical impact knocked the breath from him and cracked the already strained metal. The fault raced through the copper return line before he could break the connection to his wrist. His control bracer flashed white and locked his chakra pathways for a few seconds, long enough for his knees to fold beneath him. Kaie kicked the barrier blade away and pinned his bound arm with a wire loop before the feedback faded. Naruto landed badly, rolled twice, and lay staring at the ceiling until Kaede grabbed his wrist and pulled him up. Daichi appeared in the doorway with a torn sleeve and blood on his forehead. When the suppression field flickered, he had used the opening to drop the first guard with the jammed door and collapse a rotting support rack across the second man's path. He looked at the ruined chamber, the disabled barrier specialist, the disappearing clones, and the scorch marks left by the Nine-Tails chakra. Then he asked whether this counted as half a plan succeeding. Naruto said it counted as at least 30 victories. Kaede told him to shut up. Anko reached them several minutes later, after driving the remaining mercenaries away from the civilian route. She had captured 2 and forced 3 more to surrender after their suppression field collapsed. She looked at Kaede first. Kaede straightened and admitted that she had disobeyed a direct order. Anko said the result had saved Naruto, but the order still existed, and all 3 genin would answer for the choices they had made. Then, she pulled Naruto's damaged transport seal off his chest, checked that he was still standing, and cuffed Masato with enough restraints for 3 prisoners. This time, Masato Kurose left the ravine in Konoha restraints. The first messenger snake reached a Fire Country patrol before dawn. Reinforcements arrived after the fighting was over, which was late enough to prove that waiting inside the weakening post would not have solved the crisis. By morning, the road was secure. Keiko accounted for all 6 medicine cases. 5 remained sealed. The 6th had been opened to treat Anko, the wounded patrolman, and 2 civilians hurt during the evacuation. The headman signed for the shipment, and Kawawara began rationing it immediately because the previous 3 deliveries were still missing. The client who had hired Masato remained unknown, while Masato himself was in custody. The return to Konoha was quieter than Naruto expected. At the gate, Konoha looked ordinary. Travelers came and went, guards checked papers, and the village continued as if Team Anko had returned from any other mission. One report could not erase 12 years of fear. Anko submitted the report anyway. It recorded the intelligence failure that had kept the mission at C rank, the ambush, the 2 different suppression systems, Masato's capture, the completed medicine delivery, the rescue of the civilians, and the destruction of the mercenary network operating around Kawara. A separate review began immediately to determine how 3 robberies had concealed organized shinobi involvement for so long. The report also recorded, in plain official language, that Naruto Uzumaki had identified the enemy's seal pattern, protected the medical convoy during the first attack, surrendered himself to prevent civilian casualties, and played a decisive role in defeating Masato Kurose. The commendation did not erase the disciplinary section. Naruto received a formal reprimand for abandoning his commander's position and surrendering himself without authorization. Kaede and Daichi received reprimands for pursuing him after Anko had ordered them to remain with the post. Team Anko was removed from field assignments for 1 week and assigned a full tactical review of the incident. Anko told them that saving people could make a decision understandable without making every part of it professionally acceptable. Naruto read the commendation paragraph 3 times. He had heard praise from Kaede before. Iruka had encouraged him. Sachiko had defended him so often that half the street was afraid of her cane. This was different. A Konoha mission record did not love him. It did not feel sorry for him. It simply stated what he had done. For once, the village had put his name beside something useful and meant it. Before the twins were allowed to go home, Hiruzen called them into a private room with Anko and Sachiko. He confirmed the birth records himself. Kaede's chakra network had been dangerously unstable for the first days of her life, but had recovered as the medics expected. Naruto had received the 9 tails because his body was the only one of the 2 capable of surviving the seal at that moment. Hiruzen also admitted that the silence afterward had been his order. He had feared that telling children too young to understand the danger would turn the village secret into playground rumor and put Naruto at greater risk. Once Naruto became a Genin, Hiruzen had decided the truth should be given to him under the supervision of a team leader who already understood the seal. A private briefing had been scheduled for the week after the Kawawara assignment. Anko had argued that Naruto should be told before his first mission beyond routine village work. Hiruzen had delayed, and that delay left an enemy to tell Naruto first. Naruto did not accept the explanation as an apology. He asked Sachiko whether she had known. She said she had known enough to understand why people feared him, and had been bound by the Hokage's order not to tell either child. She had obeyed because she believed keeping them safe mattered more than being forgiven later. Looking at Naruto now, she admitted that she was no longer certain she had made the right choice. Kaede took the answer harder than Naruto expected. For years, she had thought the adults around them possessed some fair explanation that children were too young to understand. Now she knew the explanation had included a choice about what the twins were allowed to know about their own lives. Neither sibling shouted. Naruto simply said he needed time before he could decide what he thought of any of them. Sachiko nodded and did not reach for him. The reaction outside the Hokage building was uneven. Some shinobi who heard about the mission thought the Genin team had been lucky. Others were more interested in Masato's unknown employer than in Naruto. A few civilians muttered that allowing the Nine-Tails vessel outside the village had created the danger in the first place. But the story moved through the academy too. Younger students argued about how many shadow clones Naruto had actually made. One version claimed there had been 50. Another claimed 100. By the end of the week, someone insisted Naruto had filled an entire mountain with copies of himself. Naruto did nothing to correct that version. 3 days after returning, he entered Hara's grocery store alone. Hara looked up from a crate of radishes. For years, that was the moment when his shoulders tightened and his eyes dropped to Naruto's hands. This time, he only asked what Naruto needed. Naruto stood near the doorway longer than necessary. Then he bought eggs, green onions, and a packet of dried noodles. Hara counted the coins, handed back the change, and turned to the next customer. Hara offered no sudden warmth or apology. He simply treated Naruto like the customer standing in front of him. Naruto walked home with the bag held carefully against his chest and decided he preferred that to a cake. Kaede had her own meeting that afternoon. Takase repeated the offer of advanced training, but the mission had changed its terms. Kaede's recommendation was frozen until the disciplinary review ended. Her performance at Kawara proved that she had the control and judgment expected from a specialized candidate, he admitted. While leaving Anko's assigned position proved that discipline could not be treated as optional, simply because the outcome had been good. If the recommendation was restored, the original arrangement would eventually remove Kaede from Team Anko and place her in separate training. A few months earlier, she would have heard only the opportunity. Now, she asked whether specialized training actually required her to abandon her team, or whether that was simply the easiest arrangement for the instructors. Takase frowned. Kaede did not refuse the program. She told him she wanted the training. She wanted to become stronger. She wanted access to every lesson she had earned. But if the price was an automatic order to distance herself from Naruto because other adults found their bond inconvenient, then the terms would have to change. Takase warned her that students did not normally negotiate program structure. Kaede replied that he had called her exceptional often enough. He could decide whether he meant it. She left before her courage had time to collapse. The house was not suddenly comfortable again after the meeting with Hiruzen. Naruto answered Sachiko in shorter sentences, and Sachiko gave both twins more space than usual, but ordinary habits continued around the tension. At home that evening, Kaede found Naruto kneeling beside his old victory chart. He had preserved every ridiculous category and added several new ones after Kawara. Defeating Evil Barrier Guy, 10 points. Saving teammate from Evil Barrier Guy, 10 points. Being kidnapped and still winning, 5 points for difficulty. Naruto had awarded himself 20 extra points for saving his sister. She told him rescuing a sibling could not count as 20 separate victories. Naruto argued that emotional value increased the score. Kaede pointed out that she had rescued him too. Naruto considered this and added 1 point to her column. Kaede chased him through the house with the chart rolled into a club. Sachiko shouted from the kitchen that if either of them broke another wall, both legendary heroes would be repairing it before breakfast. Naruto escaped through the window. Kaede followed. Their argument continued across the roof until both were laughing too hard to keep fighting. Late that same night, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat alone in his office, with Masato Kurose's preliminary interrogation report open beside Team Anko's mission record. Masato had refused to identify his buyer. The containment equipment, payment method, and coded instructions suggested resources beyond an ordinary mercenary group. That problem could wait until intelligence had more to work with. 2 other documents could not. The first came from senior shinobi responsible for village security. After the uncontrolled release of Nine-Tails chakra at Kawara, they recommended removing Naruto from a normal genin team and placing him under permanent military supervision appropriate to a Jinchuriki. The second concerned Kaede. Her talent, discipline, and value as a future kunoichi were no longer in question. The authors recommended separating her training from Naruto before attachment to her brother caused further violations of command and damaged her development. Hiruzen read both proposals twice. On the desk beneath them lay Anko's final note. The twins were unstable, when adults forced them into opposite roles. Kaede became rigid when expected to be the good child. Naruto became reckless when expected to be the dangerous one. At Kawawara, they had succeeded when neither was asked to carry the other. Hiruzen placed the two proposals side by side. One demanded control of Naruto. The other demanded distance from Kaede. Both signature lines remained blank when he extinguished the lamp.